There are seasons upon the earth that appear ordinary to the hurried eye, yet heaven has clothed them with sacred meaning. Among all the months that pass through the hands of humanity like grains of sand slipping through trembling fingers, there is one month that carries a weight unlike the others, a month not merely marked by hunger of the body, but by awakening of the soul, a month in which silence speaks louder than noise, restraint becomes richer than indulgence, and the unseen world seems nearer than before. It is the month of Ramadan, the month of fasting, the month in which the Holy Quran was first revealed as light for wandering hearts and mercy for a weary world. How strange it is that mankind spends most of life attempting to satisfy itself while remaining profoundly empty within. People fill their tables, their schedules, their minds, and yet the soul continues whispering its ancient ache. For the human being was never designed to live by appetite alone. There is within every person a deeper hunger no feast upon earth can fully satisfy. It is the hunger for truth, for meaning, for nearness to the Creator. And Ramadan arrives each year like a gentle but firm reminder that the soul must not become a servant to the flesh. The world teaches people to obey every desire immediately. Hunger comes and food is taken. Thirst comes and drink is poured. Weariness comes and comfort is pursued. Humanity has become so accustomed to instant satisfaction that even brief discomfort feels unbearable. Yet Ramadan enters this restless world like a quiet teacher and says to the soul, "You are more than your cravings. You are more than your impulses. You are created not merely to consume, but to worship." And perhaps that is why fasting possesses such mysterious power. It strips away illusions. It exposes how deeply people have become enslaved to things they believe they controlled. A man may think himself strong until a simple thirst unsettles his temper. Another may Jinn himself patient until hunger reveals the storm hidden within him. Fasting uncovers the secret condition of the heart. Yet it does not expose weakness in order to humiliate. It reveals weakness so the soul may finally seek God with sincerity. There is something profoundly sacred about willingly stepping away from lawful pleasures for the sake of obedience to the Creator. The world cannot understand such surrender because it measures freedom by indulgence. But heaven measures freedom differently. A person ruled by every appetite is not free at all. Real freedom belongs to the soul capable of mastering itself through devotion to God. The body says, "Feed me now." The spirit says, "Wait for the command of your Lord." And in that hidden battle between appetite and obedience, something holy begins to awaken within the believer. For Ramadan is not merely about abstaining from food and drink. If that were its only purpose, then hunger alone would make a person righteous. But many go hungry without becoming holy. The deeper fast is the fast of the heart. The eyes fast from corruption, the tongue fast from cruelty and falsehood, the ears fast from gossip, the mind fast from arrogance. The soul itself begins withdrawing from the darkness that once consumed it. What a tragedy it would be for a person to endure an empty stomach while leaving the heart untouched. No, Ramadan calls humanity toward transformation far deeper than outward restraint. It calls the soul back to remembrance, and remembrance is desperately needed in a distracted age. Modern life surrounds people with endless noise. Screens glow day and night. Minds race from one concern to another. Hearts become crowded with anxieties about wealth, status, appearance, and approval. Humanity has learned how to communicate across oceans, yet often forgets how to commune with God. And amidst this chaos, Ramadan arrives like a lantern carried into darkness. It slows the hurried soul. It interrupts careless habits. It softens hearts hardened by routine. And in the quiet hunger of fasting, many begin hearing truths long drowned beneath worldly distraction. One of the great deceptions of life is the belief that people can nourish the body while neglecting the soul indefinitely. But eventually spiritual starvation reveals itself. Some possess wealth yet remain restless. Others achieve success yet feel strangely empty. There are those surrounded by crowds who still feel profoundly alone. Why? Because the soul cannot thrive disconnected from its Creator any more than a branch can survive separated from the tree. Ramadan reminds humanity of this forgotten reality. The believer wakes before dawn not merely to eat, but to remember God before the world awakens. There is something deeply moving about those silent pre-dawn moments. Streets remain still, darkness covers the horizon. Yet within homes and mosques, hearts rise toward heaven in prayer. It is as though the world itself pauses briefly to listen. And perhaps angels draw nearer in such moments than people realize, for there is beauty in unseen devotion. The world celebrates loud achievements and visible victories, but much of true spirituality grows quietly, a whispered prayer before dawn, tears shed in repentance while nobody watches, hunger endured patiently for the sake of God alone. These hidden acts possess a fragrance heaven never overlooks. Human beings are often tempted to perform goodness for applause, yet fasting carries a unique purity because much of it remains invisible. A person may appear ordinary outwardly, while inwardly waging a sacred battle against desire. Only God fully sees the sincerity behind such restraint, and sincerity is precious in the sight of heaven. Perhaps that is why Ramadan feels different from every other month. The soul becomes more aware of eternity. Earthly distractions lose some of their grip. Even ordinary actions begin carrying spiritual weight. A sip of water at sunset yields like mercy. A piece of bread tastes like gratitude. The believer realizes how many blessings were once consumed carelessly without thought. Hunger teaches appreciation, thirst teaches humility, and weakness teaches dependence upon God. There are lessons abundance rarely teaches well. A full stomach can easily produce forgetfulness. Comfort often lulls the soul into spiritual sleep, but fasting awakens awareness again. It reminds humanity of its fragility. It exposes how dependent every person truly is upon the mercy of God for even the smallest necessities. The proud man discovers he cannot survive without water. The wealthy man realizes money cannot purchase one extra moment beyond God's decree. And the distracted soul remembers that life itself is a gift sustained continually by the Creator. Ramadan strips away illusions of self-sufficiency, and this is deeply necessary because pride has always been among the greatest diseases of the human heart. Pride convinces people they are independent. It persuades them they need neither guidance nor mercy. Yet fasting quietly dismantles such arrogance. A hungry person becomes aware of weakness quickly, but weakness honestly acknowledged can become the doorway to wisdom. For the soul begins understanding that dependence upon God is not humiliation. It is reality. Every breath depends upon Him. Every heartbeat continues by His permission. Every sunrise arrives through His command, and every soul journeys toward Him whether it acknowledges Him or not. There is also mercy hidden within the communal nature of Ramadan. Humanity lives much of life divided by wealth, status, nationality, and pride. But hunger is a language understood by all people. The rich man fasting feels a small glimpse of what the poor endure regularly. Compassion awakens more deeply. Charity flows more freely. Hearts soften toward one another. A society obsessed with consumption suddenly learns restraint. A people distracted by entertainment. Nations suddenly make time for prayer, and homes once busy with worldly concerns fill with recitation of the Quran. What an extraordinary thing it is that the very month of fasting is also the month in which divine revelation descended upon humanity. This is no coincidence. The Quran did not arrive merely to inform minds. It came to awaken hearts, and hearts burdened by excess, arrogance, and distraction often struggle to receive truth clearly. Fasting prepares the soul to listen again. Hunger quiets certain worldly noises within a person. The believer becomes more reflective, more humble, more aware of eternity. Then into that softened heart comes the Quran like rain upon dry ground. The words themselves carry a unique power difficult to explain fully. They do not merely speak to intellect, but seem to reach deeper places within the human spirit. Countless people have recited them through tears without entirely understanding why their hearts trembled. There is something within. Divine revelation that recognizes the soul because the one who created the soul also authored the words, and perhaps every human being secretly longs for such guidance. The world offers endless opinions yet little certainty. Philosophies rise and collapse. Trends appear and vanish. Human wisdom shifts constantly with culture and circumstance, but revelation descends from beyond human limitation. It speaks with authority because it comes from the one who sees the beginning and the end simultaneously. How weary humanity becomes when left only to its own guidance. People chase desires that leave them emptier than before. They seek identity in temporary things. They attempt to heal spiritual wounds with worldly distractions. And generation after generation discovers the same painful truth. The human heart cannot guide itself fully without God. Thus Ramadan becomes not only a month of fasting but a month of returning to prayer, returning to discipline, returning to gratitude, returning to revelation, returning to God. and what mercy there is in being invited back again. For human beings wander easily. Even sincere souls become distracted. The routines of life slowly harden spiritual sensitivity. Worship becomes mechanical. Gratitude fades into assumption. Hearts become occupied with worldly concerns until eternity itself feels distant. Then Ramadan arrives once more like a divine invitation saying, "Awaken again. Awaken from heedlessness. Awaken from spiritual sleep. Awaken from the illusion that this temporary world is all there is." Every sunset during Ramadan carries a lesson. The fasting person waits patiently throughout the day, resisting lawful pleasures until the appointed time arrives. Then at sunset comes relief. Hunger ends. Water touches dry lips. Strength returns. And perhaps within this daily cycle lies a deeper reminder about life itself. This world, too, is temporary fasting. Believers endure hardships, resist temptations, and remain patient through difficulties for the sake of God. Yet eventually the sun of earthly life sets, and beyond that sunset awaits a greater breaking of the fast for those who remained faithful. How small worldly suffering appears beside eternal reward. How temporary earthly hunger seems beside everlasting mercy. And how foolish it is that people cling so desperately to fleeting pleasures while neglecting the eternal soul. Ramadan gently loosens the grip of worldly attachment. It reminds believers that they are travelers rather than permanent residents here. Food is withheld temporarily not because food is evil, but because even good things must never become idols. Anything capable of controlling the heart more than devotion to God becomes spiritually dangerous. The human heart was created to worship. If it does not worship God, it inevitably worships something else. Wealth, pleasure, status, desire, approval, power. Something will always sit upon the throne of the heart. Ramadan teaches the believer to place God there once more. And when God occupies the center of life properly, everything else begins falling into healthier order. Possessions no longer define identity. Difficulties no longer destroy hope entirely. Success no longer intoxicates the soul with arrogance. The believer walks through life differently because eternity becomes more real than temporary circumstances. This transformation does not happen automatically. There are many who fast outwardly while inwardly remaining unchanged. The body abstains while the heart continues feeding upon pride, envy, anger, and vanity. Such fasting becomes empty ritual rather than spiritual awakening. But sincere fasting changes a person, not instantly perhaps, but deeply. The believer who enters Ramadan honestly begins confronting hidden weaknesses. Impatience becomes visible. Selfishness becomes noticeable. Dependence upon worldly comforts becomes exposed. And this can feel uncomfortable at first because used truth often is. Yet healing begins only when wounds are acknowledged. The month of Ramadan is therefore not merely a season of restriction. It is a season of purification. The soul is being cleansed from attachment. The heart is being softened through remembrance. The spirit is being strengthened through discipline. And beneath it all flows the mercy of God, inviting humanity closer. There is something profoundly beautiful about millions of believers across the earth fasting together. Different languages, different nations, different cultures, yet all turning toward the same Creator in obedience. The wealthy executive and the laborer break their fast alike. Kings and servants feel the same hunger. Before God, worldly distinctions lose their illusion of greatness, for death eventually strips away every earthly title, and the soul stands before its Creator alone. Ramadan helps people remember this before it is too late. It teaches that real honor lies not in status but in right, gettysness, not in what one owns but in who one becomes before God. And perhaps that is why nights in Ramadan carry such unusual peace. Mosques fill with recitation, hearts grow tender. Tears come more easily during prayer. Even those long distant from faith often feel something stirring within them during this month. It is as though the soul remembers an ancient longing it had nearly forgotten. Because deep within every human being is the desire for nearness to the divine. Some spend years trying to silence that longing with distractions. Others bury it beneath ambition or pleasure, yet it remains there quietly waiting, and Ramadan awakens it again. For there is a peculiar tenderness that enters the heart when the body grows weak for the sake of God. The world often associates strength with indulgence, abundance, and visible power, yet spiritual strength frequently emerges through restraint. A person discovers something remarkable during Ramadan. The soul can rise even while the body is denied. In fact, sometimes the soul rises because the body is denied. The human being is a strange creature. Given constant comfort, he often forgets gratitude. Given endless pleasure, he quickly becomes numb to wonder. Blessings repeated daily begin to feel ordinary until suddenly they are withheld. Then even a sip of water becomes extraordinary mercy. And perhaps this is one of the hidden wisdoms within fasting. It restores sight to hearts blinded by familiarity. How many people walk through life surrounded by miracles they no longer notice? The beating of the heart, the coolness of water, the warmth of bread, the embrace of loved ones, the ability to speak, breathe, and walk beneath the sky. Humanity receives these gifts continually until forgetfulness settles over the soul like dust upon an abandoned mirror. Then Ramadan arrives and wipes the mirror clean. Suddenly ordinary things shine again. The believer tastes gratitude not merely as an idea but as a living reality. Liti, and gratitude changes people profoundly. A grateful soul complains less because it recognizes mercy more clearly. It becomes difficult to remain endlessly bitter while consciously acknowledging blessings from God. Gratitude softens the heart. It turns attention away from constant dissatisfaction and redirects it toward divine generosity. Yet Ramadan teaches something even deeper than gratitude. It teaches longing. The fasting person spends the day waiting for sunset, waiting for relief, waiting for permission to drink, to eat, to rest from restraint. And through this waiting, patience begins stretching the soul wider than before. Modern humanity has grown deeply uncomfortable with waiting. People demand instant answers, instant comfort, instant success. Delays feel almost intolerable because society has trained individuals to expect immediate satisfaction. Yet some of the greatest virtues grow only through waiting: patience, trust, endurance, reliance upon God. These are not born in moments of ease but in seasons of restraint, and Ramadan becomes a sacred school where the soul learns again how to wait with dignity. The believer does not break the fast one moment early, even if alone and unseen. Why? Because fasting is ultimately not about public appearance. It is about consciousness of God. A person may hide from society but not from the Creator. Thus Ramadan quietly cultivates sincerity within the hidden places of the heart. How desperately sincerity is needed in an age obsessed with appearances. Many people spend enormous effort constructing outward images while neglecting inward reality. They polish reputation while the soul quietly decays beneath the surface. Yet God has never been deceived by appearances. He sees the intention beneath every action, the motive beneath every word, the secret condition of every heart. Ramadan invites believers to become honest before God again, not pretending, not performing, but standing sincerely before their Creator in weakness and hope. And there is strange peace in such honesty. The soul grows exhausted trying to maintain masks constantly, pretending to be stronger, wiser, purer, or happier than one truly is becomes a heavy burden. But before God, all illusions collapse. Hunger itself becomes a reminder of human limitation. No person is self-sustaining. No soul survives independently. Humanity is fragile despite its pride. And recognizing this fragility can either lead toward despair or toward humility. Ramadan guides the believer toward humility, and humility is among the most beautiful qualities a human being can possess. The humble heart remains teachable. It recognizes its need for mercy. It does not place itself above others, and it approaches God not with arrogance but with reverence. There is a kind of arrogance that subtly infects the modern world. People begin imagining themselves masters of existence simply because technology has increased human capabilities. They speak confidently about conquering nature, controlling destiny, reshaping morality itself according to preference. Yet all human pride can be humbled by a single illness, a single moment of weakness, a single decree from God. Ramadan reminds humanity of this truth gently but firmly. The strongest man still thirsts. The wealthiest person still hungers. The most powerful ruler still depends upon sleep, food, and breath granted by God alone. And in recognizing dependence, the believer becomes softer, kinder, and more compassionate toward others. Compassion flourishes naturally in Ramadan because hunger awakens empathy. A person who has felt thirst throughout the day becomes more aware of those who thirst daily. One who experiences weakness begins noticing the suffering often ignored before. Charity, therefore, flows abundantly during this month, not merely from obligation, but from awakened awareness. It is difficult to remain indifferent to pain once one has tasted discomfort. RT personally. And perhaps this too reveals something about divine wisdom. God does not merely command generosity abstractly. He allows believers to experience a measure of deprivation so compassion may move from theory into reality. The heart transformed by Ramadan begins seeing differently, noticing differently, feeling differently. Worldly distractions lose some of their brilliance while eternal realities become more vivid. Even time itself feels altered during this month. The hours no longer revolve entirely around worldly pursuits, but around prayer, remembrance, and worship. The believer begins structuring life around God rather than attempting to fit God into leftover fragments of life. This reversal is profoundly important. For many people treat spirituality as secondary, something attended to only after worldly concerns have been satisfied. But the soul cannot thrive when God remains an afterthought. Humanity was created to worship first and build life around that worship. IP. Ramadan restores this forgotten order. Prayer regains priority. The Quran regains centrality. The remembrance of God enters daily life more consciously, and the soul begins breathing again after long suffocation beneath distraction. There is also deep symbolism in the fact that the Quran was first revealed during Ramadan. Revelation descended into a world filled with ignorance, tribal hatred, injustice, and spiritual confusion. Humanity wandered in darkness, believing itself enlightened. Then divine words entered history carrying guidance like dawn breaking across a sleeping world. Light has always disturbed darkness. Truth has always unsettled falsehood. And revelation challenges humanity precisely because it refuses to flatter human ego. The Quran does not merely comfort, it confronts. It calls people away from selfishness toward surrender, away from arrogance toward humility, away from heedlessness toward remembrance. And because human beings often resist truth, hat threatens pride, revelation requires softened hearts to receive it properly. Fasting softens those hearts. A distracted soul rarely listens deeply. But hunger quiets certain worldly attachments long enough for the spirit to hear more clearly. Thus Ramadan becomes not only a month of physical restraint, but a season of spiritual attentiveness. The believer listens differently during Ramadan. Verses once recited mechanically suddenly penetrate deeper. Prayers once hurried become sincere. Tears appear unexpectedly, for the soul itself is awakening again. How mysterious it is that divine words can touch people so differently depending upon the condition of the heart. The same verse may pass unnoticed one year and shatter the soul with meaning another year. This is because revelation is not merely read, it is encountered, and the heart must be receptive for that encounter to unfold fully. Ramadan prepares the heart, not through magic, but through discipline, reflection, humility, why and worship. And discipline itself is greatly misunderstood by the modern world. Many view discipline as restriction rather than liberation. Yet without discipline, people become slaves to impulse. They drift wherever desire pushes them. Their moods govern them. Their appetites rule them. Ramadan teaches believers that they are capable of saying no to themselves for the sake of something greater. This is spiritual strength, not dominance over others, but mastery over oneself. The person unable to resist every craving remains imprisoned by desire no matter how outwardly free they appear. But the one who disciplines the soul gains inner freedom difficult to describe. Such freedom produces peace. For much anxiety arises from inner chaos. Desires pull the heart in countless directions. Pride battles conscience. Temptation battles faith. The undisciplined soul becomes noisy and restless within itself. But worship gradually orders the heart again. Prayer centers it. Fasting purifies it. The Quran illuminates it, and remembrance softens it. Then peace begins entering where turmoil once lived. This peace is not dependent entirely upon circumstances. Many believers endure hardship during Ramadan. Some fast while carrying grief. Others struggle with illness, poverty, loneliness, or fear. Yet despite these difficulties, many still describe Ramadan as the most peaceful month of the year. Why? Because peace ultimately does not come from possessing everything one desires. It comes from nearness to God. A heart distant from God remains restless even amidst luxury. A heart near to God can taste serenity even amidst hardship. This is one of the great mysteries the world struggles to understand. Spiritual peace cannot be purchased, manufactured, or forced through worldly means alone. It emerges when the soul aligns properly with its Creator. Ramadan nurtures this alignment. The believer spends less time consumed by worldly excess and more time contemplating Niti. Death feels nearer during Ramadan, not in a morbid sense, but in a clarifying one. Life appears temporary again. Priorities become rearranged. Arguments that once seemed enormous lose significance, material obsessions lose some of their charm, and the heart begins longing more deeply for what lasts forever. There is mercy in remembering death. The world often avoids speaking of mortality because it threatens human pride. People distract themselves endlessly to escape confronting their temporary existence. Yet forgetting death leads easily toward heedlessness. A person who imagines endless time postpones repentance, delays goodness, and wastes precious days carelessly. But Ramadan awakens awareness that life itself is fragile. Another year is never guaranteed. Another Ramadan is never promised. And therefore the believer turns toward God sincerely while time still remains. How many hearts soften during Ramadan after years of hardness? How many prayers rise from lips low? NG silent. How many wandering souls begin returning toward God again? There is profound hope in this month because it reminds humanity that mercy remains available. No matter how distant a person may feel, the door of repentance stands open. God's mercy exceeds human failure, and this mercy itself humbles the believing heart. For no soul enters paradise purely by personal merit. Humanity depends entirely upon divine compassion. Ramadan intensifies awareness of this truth. The believer fasts, prays, gives charity, and recites revelation not out of arrogance, but out of longing for God's mercy and pleasure. There is beauty in longing for God. Not fearful distance alone, but yearning closeness. The lover longs naturally for the beloved, and the faithful soul longs for nearness to its Creator. This longing transforms worship from empty obligation into intimate devotion. Prayer becomes conversation rather than ritual. Fasting becomes love expressed through sacrifice. The Quran comes nourishment rather than mere recitation. And the nights of Ramadan become filled with quiet intimacy between servant and Lord. Perhaps nowhere is this intimacy more evident than during the final nights of Ramadan. Fatigue deepens. The body grows weaker from weeks of fasting. Yet many believers become even more devoted rather than less. Mosques fill late into the night. Hands rise in supplication. Tears fall freely. Why? Because hearts sense something sacred drawing near. The soul recognizes opportunities eternity may never repeat, and so people seek forgiveness, mercy, guidance, and closeness to God with unusual sincerity. There are moments during Ramadan when worldly distractions seem almost to dissolve briefly. Standing shoulder to shoulder in prayer, believers experience something rare in ordinary life. Status disappears. Wealth becomes irrelevant. Pride softens. All stand equally before God in need of mercy. What a powerful reminder this is of humanity's true condition. People spend so much effort distinguishing themselves from one another through worldly measures, yet before God every soul stands equally dependent. The illusion of superiority collapses in worship. The king and the laborer bow their heads upon the same earth, and one day every human being will return to that earth permanently. Ramadan therefore teaches not only spirituality but perspective. The world is temporary, the soul is eternal, God is near. And life's true purpose lies not in endless consumption or self-glorification, but in knowing, worshipping, and drawing nearer to the Creator. This realization changes how a person walks through life, even beyond Ramadan itself. The believer who truly absorbs the lessons of this month cannot remain entirely the same afterward. Something shifts inwardly. Perhaps patience deepens. Perhaps gratitude strengthens. Perhaps attachment to worldly excess weakens. Perhaps prayer becomes sweeter. Or perhaps the heart simply becomes more aware of God in ordinary moments. And such awareness is itself a tremendous gift. For the greatest tragedy is not worldly hardship but spiritual heedlessness. A person may survive poverty, illness, and loss while still remaining spiritually alive. But the soul disconnected from remembrance slowly hardens no matter how outwardly comfortable life becomes. Ramadan revives remembrance again, and remembrance revives the soul. The tongue repeats the names of God until the heart begins awakening beneath them. The Quran is recited until divine words echo within the spirit long after the pages close. Hunger continues day after day until discipline reshapes desire itself. Then gradually the believer realizes Ramadan was never merely about enduring deprivation. It was always about becoming more fully alive before God. And so, as the sacred days of Ramadan pass like lanterns glowing gently through the darkness of this world, let the heart not return unchanged to its old sleep. Let the hunger you endured remind you of your dependence upon God. Let the thirst you felt awaken compassion for those who suffer daily. Let the verses of the Quran continue echoing within your soul long after the month has gone. For Ramadan was never meant to be merely a season upon the calendar. It was meant to become a transformation within the heart. Do not allow the world to steal again what this holy month restored within you. Guard the peace you found in prayer. Protect the softness that entered your heart in the quiet hours before dawn. Hold tightly to the remembrance of God that carried you through moments of weakness and drew you nearer to mercy. For the soul that has once tasted closeness to its Creator can never truly be satisfied again by the empty distractions of this temporary world. The Quran first descended in Ramadan not simply to be recited by tongues, but to awaken humanity from spiritual darkness into divine light. And every believer who sincerely fasts and turns toward God walks a little further into that light, a light that humbles pride, a light that heals hearts. A light that reminds weary souls that this life is not without purpose, nor suffering without meaning, nor worship without reward. One day, the final sunset of life itself will arrive for every soul. The tables of this world will fade, the noise of earthly ambition will fall silent, and only what was done sincerely for God will remain. And on that day, those moments of hunger endured patiently for His sake, those tears shed quietly in prayer, those nights spent reciting His words, will not have been lost. They will stand before the believer as treasures far greater than anything this world could offer. So walk forward from Ramadan with a heart more awake than before. Let your prayers become more sincere, your gratitude more constant, your compassion more abundant, and your trust in God more complete. For the Lord who guided you through the month of fasting is the same Lord who will guide you through every trial, every uncertainty, and every season still waiting ahead. And perhaps the greatest lesson Ramadan leaves behind is this, that the human soul was never created merely to eat, sleep, strive, and perish. It was created to know God, to worship Him, to seek His mercy, and to journey toward Him through every breath until the soul finally returns to the one who called it into existence from the very beginning.